Stage-Gate is very much an enterprise-wide innovation business process. It's not a project management technique or method. It's not a waterfall method. Some people confuse Stage-Gate with a waterfall method, especially if they're within the software industry, because waterfall is a methodology that has been used for years within the software industry. Top performers rely on Stage-Gate to create a culture not only of discipline that helps to focus resources and capability on innovation, but then also to create and encourage a longer-term commitment. But it's an ongoing balancing act to ensure that we're applying the right amount of rigor to our projects, that we're remaining as flexible as we need to, and that we're applying very good judgment as we make decisions whether to proceed with projects or whether to kill them. And another key takeaway is that because we get a question often around project management, not only is project management or project management methods complementary to the Stage-Gate process, they're critical really to its high functioning. And that kind of brings us to our next topic, which is now more recently the promise of Agile. And we get a lot of questions about Agile and how it can be leveraged in a successful innovation program, or how it could be used within an innovation program. And I know many of you are already familiar with Agile, and so just bear with me. I'm going to provide just a few highlights of Agile, because some of those that are joining us today, they may not be quite as familiar with Agile. And so the Agile Manifesto really began in earnest, namely because of the mounting frustrations that surrounded so many software development projects. And it was really becoming a problem. The whole software industry found itself in general served as the butt of many jokes. How to make sure your project is late, or how to make sure it's over budget, and how do you make sure that you develop something that your customers are going to hate. And so really for this particular industry, something had to be done, and the concept of Agile really came at the right time. The simplicity of the 12 principles is brilliant. It helped folks to immediately appreciate that there was a need to get back to the basics, make sure that we know what our priority is, which is, first and foremost, satisfying our customers, and to develop a focus so that we were essentially spending our efforts and putting our time on what really mattered most. And so I won't bother getting into all of the details of the principles, but rather when you roll up those principles and you look at them as 4 key values, really what we're looking at is a desire to concentrate on working effectively together as a cross-functional team or a high-performance team, and stop obsessing over the procedures and focus more so on the individuals and the teams that we're working on projects. Focus on a working piece of software and less on non-value-add documentation, which is something that occurred quite a bit as well within this industry. And remembering that we're here for the customer, and to collaborate with the customer to help them reach their goal, instead of focusing on the negotiation of a particular contract. And focus on doing what's right. We've all been in a situation where planning and thinking through planning to create that initial plan, but often the plan itself doesn't hold as you start to move forward. And so getting used to the idea that it was probably more important to spend the time discussing what needed to be done and gaining an understanding over an approach moving forward, and spend less time and obsess less over were we following a plan precisely to every single activity. And some of these should sound familiar to you, because many of these values were incorporated also into a Stage-Gate model for taking new ideas from inception through to launch. Some of the characteristics, of a project using Agile techniques is that you'd find that you're looking at a self-organized, co-located team, often working face-to-face, and that entire team goes the distance from start to finish with the project. And we have identified that that is indeed a best practice and one that's incorporated also into Stage-Gate. Their focus is on fixed, incremental, and iterative time-boxed units of development. And again, breaking the more chaotic, complex project into smaller, more increments and getting them done and then moving on to the next. And then release iterations of the product so that we can get fast feedback from customers, especially when customers are unable to articulate what they're looking for. They can certainly react to something once they see it. And so these are some of the characteristics of projects using an Agile approach. And in my simple mind, I guess I look at it really from a project level perspective, and I look at it using the triple constraint theory. By nature of the typical portfolio of most American companies, the majority of projects that are pursued really start with a fairly good definition of the desired end result or the desired deliverable that we owe to a customer. And so if you take a look at the triple constraint triangle up at the top, and you see scope is at the top, and that is because scope is fixed in these kinds of situations. The project team figures out really how best to match how much time and how much money is needed to achieve that particular goal or that particular scope. And traditional project management methods really work great for these types of projects. They're fairly well defined, and you'll notice that most organizations that do these types of projects, they use a 3 or a 2-stage Stage-Gate process to manage them within. Now, for projects that have a great deal of uncertainty, especially at the beginning, this type of approach isn't as effective. And what Agile is promising or introducing is the concept of reversing the constraints so that time and cost are fixed and scope is not fixed. And really the team focuses on the goal to figure out what the scope is. What can we build? And within those constraints of time and cost, what can we build that will yield value to our customer? And for organizations that are using Agile and Stage-Gate, Agile techniques, project techniques are applied more so within a 5-stage process when there is a lot of uncertainty coming in or at the beginning of the project. Now, in taking this approach into organizations, there are common challenges that are cited, including scaling Agile techniques beyond its use in just a handful of projects, and especially in organizations that have a global footprint and globally dispersed resources that are pulled into various innovation projects. It's very challenging to achieve daily face-to-face focus with a team, especially when they're in different time zones and using different languages and in different geographies. However, organizations are getting around this by leveraging communication software to help with this because they feel that it's still worth it to try to find a way for the team to get together, but we don't want to sacrifice leveraging in the field resources that are close to the customers in different geographies. Also, the idea of letting teams run loose without any kind of oversight and with only the promise that they will definitely produce something, we don't know what yet, really does tend to scare a lot of executives. Perhaps unnecessarily so, but nonetheless, that's sort of the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. Executives do like to have some kind of visibility and oversight in, especially with investments. One of the earlier complaints and concerns and why executives articulated that they would shy away from making investments in innovation was that they just felt like it was a mysterious black hole. They didn't really understand how the projects were unfolding. And so that's clearly a challenge also when organizations contemplate whether or not to adopt Agile. And so what are companies doing then to leverage the best of both? And I think they've figured out fairly quickly that asking whether to use Stage-Gate or Agile is almost like comparing apples and oranges. Stage-Gate serves a very different purpose, and it's an overarching business process. The question really shifts then to what types of project management methods are best to use within the stages. And there really is no clear-cut answer, but rather several considerations that you're going to want to take. And so, for example, we pulled together this little chart that lists 11 different scenarios or situations that you might want to take into consideration. Physical products, so when you're developing things like equipment or food products or anything that's capital intense, tend to work better with traditional project management because of the expenditures that have to be released for projects. But they can benefit by borrowing some of the practices and some of the attitude that comes along with Agile. Services, software, and high uncertainty products. These are situations where you might want to consider Agile because this kind of an approach enables a team to work very quickly together and to leverage the techniques offered within Agile to try to produce a product or a concept and get it before your customer or your market so that they can help shape and sculpt the definition. Any kind of projects that have a fixed deliverable, like a customer contract for something, traditional project management works for that because customers are not going to be too keen to receive something that doesn't match the definition within their deliverable. They're concentrating on getting a fixed end result and within a certain time and budget. Heavily regulated markets and mature markets also benefit from traditional project management. But as you can see, that almost all of these situations we've identified that some kind of a hybrid approach where you can borrow some of the practices of Agile are what I would recommend a really good place to consider. And globally dispersed resources, because of the sheer complexity of coordinating so many different resources and not having that ability to be able to have people face-to-face working closely together on a daily basis, traditional project management methods tend to do better in those kinds of situations. But when you have seasoned talent or a lot of veterans that are very good at product innovation, then you also have a situation where you might consider Agile. And because the veterans don't require the same kind of training wheels or process guidance or guardrails that process offers. But for many organizations, you'll see that the hybrid use of methods is becoming more and more popular. Now, what do executives want? And so, because everything always comes back to what our executives want. And so, when it comes to product innovation, Agile, Stage-Gate, what we hear from executives is, that we want profitable, sustainable growth through innovations. We want to minimize our risks. We want to let go. We don't want to meddle in with all of the projects. But we also want a common framework or language that enables success throughout the organization. They don't want mass confusion because people are unable to talk to one another. And they often ask for their organizations and their people to be more agile. And so what we don't want you to do is mistake an executive requesting the organization to be more agile as a request to implement agile project management. Rather, you want to learn and understand what is it that the executives are trying to achieve. Bruce Kirk, who is the Director of Innovation Program at Corning, spoke last year at the annual Stage-Gate Summit. And he found that for Corning to achieve all of their strategic projects, they would have to come up with some kind of a hybrid approach to all of the different tools and practices that they would be using. And essentially what this created was a situation where he would be using multitudes of methods. And so they experimented with an approach.
And Michelle, this is Dave. Just want to let you know we only have about 2 minutes left, so I wanted to give you a chance to wrap things up, and then we'll need to wrap up because unfortunately the timer cuts us off on these sessions.
Okay, no problem. Will do. Thanks a lot, Dave. And so here's an example of a company that is doing a wonderful job using a traditional stage-gate process to provide the framework for innovation, and also a project canvas that enables the team to work using Agile within each of the stages. And they've been very successful, and their very first project was their Gorilla Glass, which is, of course, the glass that's used in the Apple iPads.